We're back with another week in the end zone with Coach Noel Mazzone, and we're going to talk about some different concepts today. Formation into the boundary. We're going to talk about the explosiveness of Ole Miss offense and a little bit about Wake Forest's slow mesh play. So, Noel, another great weekend of football, and we're really starting to get through the season too.
Yeah, it's hard to believe we're already, starting the fifth weekend of college football?
Yeah.
And it's been every week's been awesome. You think that's a great weekend of football. It can't be as good the next weekend, and it's just as good or better the next weekend. Fun to see the stadiums full and all the energy and that's in the stadiums and the kids playing. It's been a lot of fun.
Definitely, and we've said that this season probably is not going to see multiple undefeated teams. I don't know if we'll see one. I mean, there was a close call for Alabama the other day. Just getting by Florida. Yeah,
that was another good game. Just good football out there right now, which is what we needed. What this country needed was some good football.
Absolutely. Well, Coach, let's get into it here. The first thing I'm going to focus on, and we mentioned this as we were talking about game planning. It was either last week or the week before, but looking at the opportunity for formation into the boundary and talking to an FCS coordinator this weekend, he asked me to ask you specifically about that and what you're looking for as far as a certain front, a certain type of defense. Are you looking for strength-based defense versus field-based defense? What are the things that prompt you to say there's a good opportunity for formation into the boundary this week?
So I think like how it hits my brain is that, offense is all about numbers and leverage. We're always trying to out-leverage the defense. And so first thing I look at is this defense we're playing, are they a field defense or formation defense team? All right, and if you're a field defense team, then the first thing that comes into mind is FIB plays. Mm-hmm. All right, and I like to tempo those in there too. So like if you're a 5.5 team, or you're just going to basically defend the field, then I think I can get numbers on you into the boundary. The next thing is okay, how are you setting your front? Are you a field front or a formation front team? So if I know you're always setting the three technique to the back no matter where the formation is, or are you always setting the three technique to the field no matter what the formation is? So those are the two main things. Is if I line up with FIB, 3x1 into the boundary, am I gaining an advantage by numbers, or am I gaining an advantage by the front by leverage? So that's the first two things. And mostly tempo, mostly tempo plays. Because I always think this, all right, if you're going to roll the coverage, if I'm 3x1 into the field, into the boundary, and your defense says it needs to roll the coverage into the boundary for my 3x1, right, then I know I've got space, all right, and I've got one-on-one opportunities in the field with my receiver over there. And really nobody to help him. Maybe a deep middle safety. That's it. Okay. So there's an advantage. And then I know if you're going to roll the coverage that way, are you then sliding the front away? So how does that fit to my run game? So I know what kind of runs I can scheme up there. Now, if you're not, so if you say, no, I don't want to leave my corner out there on an island with all that grass out there by himself. So I'm going to either balance up the secondary, the back end, or roll the coverage back to the middle of the field as in a split safety look, or I've got to walk the will out there or whatever. I got to add a guy out there to help to the field to my single receiver side. Then obviously now I think I'm gaining numbers into the boundary. So that's kind of where it all starts with the FIB stuff, to see, all right, what is their adjustment to it? Or do they just say, screw it, and they play 4-2-5 and they just play cover 3 to the field? Well, now I definitely have the numbers in the boundary.
When you look at those packages for you, what are some of your favorite runs and pass concepts that you like to use, knowing that obviously the space is cut down there?
Obviously the receiver screen, the key screen's out there into the boundary, and I usually attach that with some sort of a zone read or, some kind of 5-man surface in there. Now, if I'm going to add the tight end and go 3x1 in the boundary, so if they're going to be a post safety team, so now I can put in conflict the nickel player into the boundary and RPO off of him. If they want to play split safety and walk the nickel out into the boundary on number 2, then I've got the numbers, and I've evened up the box for me to run the football. And then the next thing is where they're putting the shade. Right? If they're putting the shade, now we're not talking 3-4 fronts. We're just talking 4-down fronts. If they're gonna now, because I put tight end into the boundary, right, and they want to put the 3 technique there, and now the shade to the field, all right, where I've got grass, I kind of like split back deer teams. So I've got numbers and grass out there. So now I can run my stretch or my pin pull, all right, or my zone read back to the boundary and read the defensive end. So they want to adjust to your formation into the boundary, as in roll the coverage that way, all right? So now I'm thinking, okay, I've got grass and space to the field. So most of the routes will start levels or whatever and start to work themselves back, all right, trying to flood the field now with your concepts.
I loved using it. We typically carried, because we would see a lot of field defense, we did carry quite a bit of formation into the boundary in the packages we would put together. One of my favorite was taking that tight bunch, right? So you're usually with a tight end at the point and your other receivers in there. I know we ran like some split zone and some pin pull. And then what I really liked, though, is, run the ball into the boundary and then get your nakeds back out to the field, right? You get the quarterback out on the edge and you have your receivers now really coming into a lot of space.
Right. You got a lot of grass out there.
Yeah, the one thing we really realized, though, is you want to reduce that receiver split to the field, too. So as you move your formation that way into the boundary, typically that guy, is, a certain distance from the tackle. We actually would maintain that. We didn't tell him to get out wider. We would maintain that because he still has enough room if we wanted to throw any kind of quick game inside where he could do that. But now his space to the outside is greater. And when he takes his guy out of there, especially if we're running play action and dragging those guys back and getting those crossers, now there's a lot of space for those guys to run to as well without anybody outside of them.
Right. And I've always been a big tempo guy with 3-by-1 in the boundary, because I just want the defense to have to think and have to change their spacing. It's just not something they do a lot of. Usually it's 3-by-1 and 3-by-1s to the field. And now, so I like the tempo and make those guys make quick decisions as far as alignments and, all right, am I in the box, out of the box? Oh, the 3 techniques or whatever. All right. So yeah, I've been doing that for a while, and I like that stuff.
So, Coach, the next one we want to focus on is Ole Miss, a team you've liked to watch this season. Very explosive and a lot of big plays out of those guys.
Yeah, it's why I love watching. And Lane's always been good, and then Libby. I think those guys do a great job. They do a good job of making the defense defend the whole field. Right, so they create spaces all over the place, and then they do a very good job of getting the ball in their playmakers' hands in space. And then, I've always felt this way about spread teams. When you don't have a tight end, you only got 5 blockers, and it's play fast, get the ball out quick. Is that the tendency to that you have to watch out for offensively is you tend to play the game in a 55 by 10 yard box. You got to have verticals. We never do enough vertical, like extend the defense. So the safeties start, playing flatter. The corners start playing flatter. So everything's in that 10-yard box. And then when you watch Ole Miss play, they make you cover the deep part of the field. Like Leach is going to run a lot of mesh and all that, which is, all that underneath stuff, throwing it quick, getting it out, doing all that kind of stuff. But he also does a great job of, you also got to stop verticals with him. He'll throw 20 verticals on you in a game. And I think that's smart by those guys, is making the defense defend the whole field. Don't make them defend just the field from the line of scrimmage to 15 yards deep. Make them defend the field from the line of scrimmage to the goal line. When you're a spread tempo team, is something you have to make yourself do.
Coach, switching gears here back to the run world and RPOs, a team that for me has been very fun to watch, and I started studying what they do back in 2019 when they started implementing this slow mesh. And when I say slow, I mean it is slow. They will literally walk the ball to the line of scrimmage, quarterback and the running back. Both of them have hands on the ball. And then as he gets to the line, he's going to make that decision to give or pull. And they run it with multiple schemes. It's inside zone. It's their stretch play. It's their counter play. I think I saw him run power with it. And there's nothing that I've ever seen like it. Now, the interesting part is you could tell in looking at what they do that this is very well coordinated and married to what the offensive line is doing, because when I time this out, I put them on a stopwatch in studying these games, and that mesh in some points would take 2.9 seconds till the quarterback pulled the ball out and threw an RPO. Well, shoot, 2.9 seconds. Your line should be probably 7 yards downfield at that point. But these guys are just spending time on level one. They're driving everything up in combos and waiting for the linebackers to come to them. Right? It's such an interesting way of attacking a defense. I haven't seen anything else like it.
No, it's funny you brought that up because, 2017, I was at Texas A&M. We played Wake Forest in the bowl game, and that's the first time I saw it. And I was like, what are they doing? I mean, is the back screwing up? Or is he supposed to hit? It wasn't your typical, zone read mesh. It was exactly how you're explaining it. And I think they ended up beating us like 54 we couldn't stop at 54 to 51 or something like that. And you're right, is that it looked like just a mosh pit in there, and then all of a sudden that back would bounce out of there and come flying out of a hole. And then it was almost impossible for the linebacker to have any chance to fit the run and also fit any kind of pass game behind him, because he had to get up in the line of scrimmage. And then, like as you were talking about, the third thing is their line. It's almost like everybody in the NFL is like running that duo scheme, where it's just heavy. It's just like heavy double team to three, and just double team him and don't come off until the linebacker comes to your level type deal. It's kind of like they've taken that duo scheme and attached their RPO game to it. So yes, Coach Clausen, like I said, when we watched it in 2017, it was like, man, that's some cool stuff. How are they doing that?
And I still haven't quite figured it out. I did have Coach Clausen on a virtual clinic, and he did talk about it. He didn't necessarily go into the details of what they do, but he showed how they attack teams with the RPO. And again, when you're getting 2.5, even up to 2.9 seconds on this mesh, the typical zone read mesh, because I wondered then, okay, they're at 2.5, let's say. What's a typical zone read mesh? It's about 1.3 seconds, right? So you're throwing quick game on that when the ball comes out, which is somewhere that 1.3 to 1.5. Now these guys keeping that ball to 2.9, if you're going drop back, 5-step drop or 3 from the gun,
you're
getting through your progression. Yeah, you're getting through your progression there.
You're 2.7 to 3.2 in a 5-step drop, right? No, and I'll tell you, Dave. I got to know Dave years ago when he was at Villanova, and we used to spend time in clinic together and do one-back clinics together. And he's a very, very smart guy.
Oh, yeah.
Very, very smart, knows football. He's really an interesting guy and a fun guy to sit and listen to talk. But, yeah, it's pretty cool what they're doing.
You're not going to put your safeties into the run fit against those guys, right? Because if you do, that's a touchdown. I mean, because those guys aren't running, 3-step slants on their RPOs. They're running, glance routes, post routes.
Yeah.
With these guys, catching the ball somewhere around 12 yards.
And they've protected all the gaps in the run game by just the technique of their O-line. So, you're not worried about backers running through and all that kind of stuff.
Nick Tabaka is the offensive line coach, and I've known him for quite a while, and I know, he certainly studied under John Strollo, and you see a lot of the influence of that technique. Though I did call John and see if I could pick his brain and if he knew anything about what these guys were doing, and other than some of the offensive line and footwork, he wasn't quite sure of all the other rhyme and reason and strategy, but I do think it's brilliant. Now, what I saw different this year, and I remember saying it Back when I was talking to somebody about this initially, I think what would really cause people issues is if you started to mix the traditional speed of a zone read with some of this slow stuff. There's really a lot to work on for a defense. You have to wait and really be patient and hold your fit on the slow mesh, and on the other one you're reacting quickly. So now it's like within a play you're changing up that tempo of the play that's running.
Really neat stuff. It's intriguing. I wish I knew how they coached all that stuff.
I'm excited to get to watch more of them as we continue to head through this, Coach. For you, who are some teams to watch here that you think are doing some good stuff and maybe are going to surprise some people as the season grinds on?
Well, I was really impressed with Fresno. I mean, they are just a few points away from probably being a top 15 team. You know, they played Oregon tough, beat UCLA. They do some really cool stuff on offense. I like watching those guys. Like I said, Ole Miss, I like watching them. I tell you, I hadn't watched them in the last week or so, but at the start of the season, I thought Virginia Tech, and I really liked Virginia Tech and Tulane. And I know Tulane had a rough time with Ole Miss, but that Ole Miss offense is that's a juggernaut right there. That's tough. But I think both Chip and Fuentes and those guys, I think they do a really good job. I like watching them on offense because they're tempo teams or run a lot of the same run schemes like everybody else is. I think they're doing a real good job. Like if you watch the Kansas City Chiefs of gaining leverage, formation, stacks, bunches, gaining leverage on people, tying different RPOs or receiver type screens instead of just a traditional, 2x2, 3x1 stuff. So it's almost like it's two game plans, right? So you game plan your 5 offensive linemen or 6 if you're using a tight end against a equally numbered box. Then you have to game plan your receivers with your motions, your stacks, your bunches on the outside to what they're doing on the back end. So like a lot of times, like defenses, sometimes some guys game plan their front and then game plan the back end. Well, I think on offense now you almost do the same thing. You game plan your run schemes, then you game plan, what complements those run schemes and what different looks can I give them? Because, defenses have caught up to the good old fashioned, hey, run the stretch. If the backside backer fits the run, throw the backside slant. Well, they know, they know we're doing that. So you have to have different ways to, attach man beaters, stacks, or bunches.
Yeah, it's definitely become even more of a chess match here. The ability to watch more and more film, to learn more online. Certainly those things I think have changed the game and it's made it exciting, right? We see all these things. Even, we've talked about this season, stuff coming back, more of the traditional stuff, the I formation stuff, seeing that quite a bit. Watched some Penn State this year, watched it on Saturday night, and you see Mike Yursich doing that, right? They're getting under center and getting into the I and running the football. Of course, he's got some air raid background in what he does too. So, those systems just being merged and building it around players.
Right. Well, and I think Keith is that the guys are doing a great job with that stuff and making you defend, not just one system, but to defend, different appearances of maybe the same schemes, but different appearances, under center, gun, motions, unbalanced, whatever. The schemes aren't changing a lot. I mean, inside zone's inside zone, any way you cut it, right? Stretch is stretch. But just how they're giving the defenses, creating extra gaps, creating, things like that for the defense. Nowadays, it used to be if you felt you could score 20, 21, 24 points, you could win a football game, right? It's not like that anymore. Exactly. It's not like that. Right. And so I believe is that, like, I think where we just got to really be aware of as a coordinator and as a play caller is you've got to create explosive plays. It's something like in a drive, one explosive play, a 12-yard run or a 16-yard pass, your scoring percentage goes up from like 30% to like 70% or something like that.
Right.
So
exactly.
And I think all these guys are doing a great job of creating, not just hoping that your guy makes a guy miss, or you squeeze through a hole or something like that, or a defensive guy falls down, but creating explosive plays for your players. And so to do that, knowing your personnel and putting, like I've always said, right? Schemes don't win football games. Players win football games. And so as a coach, it's our job to put those players in the position to their skill set to where they can create explosives for you.
It's definitely fun to watch. And, in the history of the game, the pendulum swings back and forth between the offense and the defense. The offense comes up with something that's quote unquote revolutionary. Usually you could find it somewhere in the past that people were doing that before. But in defense, adjust to change to those types of things. And then the offense changes on top of that. You look at, for example, what Iowa State is doing with the tight front. Well, there was a time when a lot of teams just called that, double eagle, right? Maybe they played it a little bit tighter with three techniques, but, that came back into the defensive world a little bit different, right? It always comes back a little bit transformed, but, we're seeing that now where teams have been built on defense to stop the spread. It used to be, if you opened any defensive playbook, the first thing they were aligned against was the pro formation I, right? A flanker, a tight end, and a split end, and an I formation, and they would line up their base defense against that. Now you open a defensive playbook, and it's aligned against spread 2x2, right? So it's just different ways that they adjust.
I can remember back in 2010 when I started running tempo and spread sets 2x2, 3x1, and all that. I mean, you may play against a 3-4 front one time, right?
Right.
Now you have to play against a 3-4 team half the time or more, because obviously a 3-4 gives the defense more options on how to line guys up, where to bring guys from, how to fit things, and all that. So there's a definite. Just it's always a cycle, right? It's always moving. It used to be in 2010 and 11, we were a tempo team, and I think us and Oregon might have been the only two tempo teams in the Pac-12.
Yeah,
and that was our advantage because nobody knew how to play. No defenses knew how to play against tempo offenses.
No, it's always interesting to see how this progresses, and some of the things that were trending last year I don't see as much this year. So it's fun to watch. It's fun to be able to sit back and watch all these games, and certainly I'm looking forward to watching another week of football and then getting back next week and talking some ball with you.
Yep. Keith, I appreciate it, buddy. Have a great week.
For some of the resources in this podcast, check the show notes. I will put that link to the Wake Forest Clinic with Dave Clausen talking about how they utilize their RPO. Follow all we're doing this season at coachingcoordinator.com and follow me on Twitter at Coach K. Grabowski.